Howdy everyone, it's Nicki and I am back with yet another set of these author questions that I'm going to answer for you. So last time we got up to question 30, so today we'll be doing 31 through to 36, which will put us about pretty much coming up for halfway through these questions. So, excuse me, I've got an itchy nose today. Question 31. What is your current work in progress? What's it about? Well, just before the end of last year I finished the first draft of a new story. It is really in very early stages still, so I don't want to get too involved in saying too much about it in case things change as I edit, but essentially it's an paranormal romance, and it's a romance with a difference. It's not pure romance. There's a bit of a mystery story going on there. There's been some murders in the supernatural community, and that's the event that brings the two main characters together. So there are vampires, there's fae, there's witches, plenty magical going on, and I'm certainly hoping to start a first round of edits on it and get a second draft out in the next few months. Ideally I'd like to have it ready to submit by about the third quarter probably. So we'll see. I'll have more news during the year as I move forward with it. And now I'm just starting to think about the first draft of another piece, which is probably going to be an MF one, but I'll see how it goes. Question 32. Do you write about any controversial topics? That's probably going to depend on what you class as controversial. I mean, to some people writing LGBT fiction is probably controversial, although to me it's perfectly normal. But I don't think so. I mean, I think from the impression I get of this question, it's going to be more about bringing like major political storylines in and things like that, but I don't really do anything like that. I stick to pretty straightforward genre fiction most of the time. I'm not particularly politically minded, so it's very unlikely I'd bring anything like that into my pieces. And I mean, in terms of other controversy, I mean, some of my stuff's a little bit more sexually explicit than others, but it just depends on the story and what heat level works for the story. But I haven't done anything sort of really extreme kinks or anything like that, so we'll see what the future holds. Not at the moment. Question 33. Can you briefly describe your writing process? Okay, so when I'm doing a first draft, I used to do a first draft on the computer, but working on the computer so much with my editing work, social media and promotion and things, I was getting tired eyes, tired wrists. So these days I tend to do my first draft in pen on a pad. Once I've got about a chapter done, I'll type it up and keep a running Word document with it as a sort of backup copy as well. Once I finish the first draft, I will print the whole thing off and start the editing process. So the first edits are usually pretty heavy, because at this point I'm still ironing out any plot kinks or character development that, you know, maybe I didn't notice something in the first draft as I was just scribbling to get the story down, and there's things that I need to, or there are things that I need to work on or tweak a little bit to make everything flow. So I tend to do that first. That's a very heavy edit. I'll then do, for a short story, at least one more round of edits and then a final proofread. If it's a novella or a novel, then I'm probably likely to do another 2 solid rounds of edits before I do the final proofread. At which point it goes off to whichever publisher I'm submitting to. Question 34. What software do you recommend for writing books? Honestly, I don't use a lot. I mean, I'm not doing a big amount of self-publishing, which is perhaps the difference. I type all my stories in Word. If I am creating an ebook, whether for self-publishing or for another reason, I will do it in InDesign. I have a copy of InDesign here at home, so I'll make the cover in Photoshop and then I'll create the ebook in eDesign, which gives me an EPUB. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about writing software, because I don't use things like Grammarly or Scrivener or anything like that. So I'm sure others who are answering these questions will have much better responses and a few more suggestions for you than I do on this one. Question 35. How do you feel about movie novelizations? This is really interesting because just this morning I created a blog post for one of the blog hops, and the question in this week's book blogger hop was asking about movie and film, movie and TV, sorry, tie-in novels. So it's the same sort of thing really. Look, they're not brilliant generally. I have a few, I mean, looking up at my shelf at the moment, I do have the ones for Van Helsing, and I have the one for Crimson Peak, just because I really love those films, and so I fancied the novels, and you know, there's nothing wrong with them per se, but they're not works of art, they're just pretty average reads. I also have some of the novels and novellas that they released in connection with Heroes and Heroes Reborn, and again, they're okay, but nothing special. They're really just something to have because as a fan I just want to have some memorabilia and other things connected to the TV show. I am planning to get the 3 originals, like short novel tie-ins, but that's mainly because, as you all know from previous videos, I'm totally in love with Elijah Michelson. That's the only reason I'll be getting those at some point. So yeah, I think they're usually pretty average. I mean, I don't know, if you guys have read one that you think is well above par, pop it in the comments because I'd be interested to see. But for me, it's only if I'm such a huge fan of the film that I want to get stuff connected to it that I would buy them. Question 36, how do you deal with sex in your writing? I sort of touched on this a little bit earlier, didn't I, with the controversial topics, but there's not been masses of sex in my mainstream, like MF drama fiction. There's one short scene in Ragnarok Chronicles, but most of it is more fade to black, or stuff that happens off page, if you like. It's not really too explicit, much lower heat level. With my LGBT writing though, my MM romances, Asteroidonia, I do tend to have a bit more sex in them, but it does depend on the story. I mean, I've written some really sweet romances, things like Quiet as a Mouse, that is just a couple first finding each other, so there's not really much sex in it, they're just getting to know each other and it's the start of their relationship. But then I've written other ones like Souls for Sale, which is reasonably explicit, it's quite a high heat level, there's several fairly long sex scenes in it, and it will depend absolutely on the need of the story. I don't put sex scenes in just because, you know, there has to be a reason for it, it has to feel natural as part of the action. So I don't mind writing them, I have no problem writing them, but I won't use them gratuitously. I'll only use them if I think it's relevant. So I think that brings us to the end of question 36 and another video. But I will be back again very soon, this time next month, when we will be doing questions 37 to 42. And I can't wait to see you all then. Bye for now.